I never thought my life would turn into something out of a bad movie. The kind where the guy gets completely blindsided, where everyone sees the signs except him. But here I am, telling this story, because maybe someone else needs to hear it. My name is Alex. I'm an analyst, which is just a fancy way of saying I spend most of my time staring at numbers and patterns. I like things that make sense, things I can understand. People, though. They're unpredictable. And love? That's the biggest wild card of them all. I met Emily 4 years ago. She wasn't like the others. She was warm, full of life, the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they belonged. And somehow, she chose me. Me, the guy who prefers quiet nights over wild parties, deep conversations over small talk. Our relationship had always been solid. At least, I thought it was. We had our ups and downs like anyone else, but I believed in us. I believed in her. As the wedding day got closer, little things started to feel off. Nothing obvious, nothing that screamed danger. Just a shift. A hesitation in her voice when we talked about the future. A distant look in her eyes when I told her how much I loved her. And then there was him, Ryan. Ryan was an old friend of Emily's. The kind of old friend that lingers a little too long in conversations, laughs a little too hard at inside jokes, and always seems to be around. I tried not to let it get to me. I told myself I was being paranoid. That Emily loved me, that I was the one she chose. I should have trusted my gut. Looking back, I can't believe how blind I was. The signs were there, small at first, easy to brush off if I didn't want to see them. And I didn't. Ryan had always been in the background, a shadow in our relationship. Emily introduced him early on, just a friend from college, someone who used to be important to her but wasn't anymore. I took her word for it. After all, we all have pasts. I wasn't the jealous type, and I never wanted to be that guy, the insecure fiancé suspicious of every man in her life. But things started to shift in the months leading up to the wedding. At first, it was subtle. She would mention him in passing more than usual. A funny thing, he said, a random memory from their past. It annoyed me, sure, but I wasn't about to start a fight over something so small. Then, the messages started. Late at night, her phone would light up with his name. She'd laugh at whatever he sent, then tilt her screen away like it was nothing. I'd ask about it, and she'd brush it off. Oh, it's just Ryan being Ryan. And I let it go. Every time. I told myself I was overthinking. That I was just stressed about the wedding. That maybe I was the problem, getting too caught up in my own doubts. Then came the gatherings. The pre-wedding parties, the meetups with friends, the nights out. Somehow, Ryan always found a way to be there. I told myself it was because we shared a social circle, that it wasn't weird for him to be around. But it was weird. It was the way she lit up when he arrived, the way she leaned in just a little too much when they talked. It was the way she pulled away from me when I put my arm around her, like I was an afterthought. Still, I swallowed it. Ignored the knots in my stomach. Forced a smile when he made jokes at my expense, when their banter felt just a little too familiar. I told myself it didn't matter. Because Emily chose me. Because we were getting married. But deep down, I already knew, something was wrong. I wish I could say there was one clear moment where everything clicked, where I saw the truth and walked away with my dignity intact. But that's not how it happened. It was slower than that. Like a small crack in glass that spreads before you even realize the whole thing is about to shatter. It all came to a head at our engagement party. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, surrounded by friends and family, people who were happy for us. And for a while, it felt that way. I held Emily's hand, watched her laugh with our friends, and told myself that everything was fine. Then Ryan showed up. I remember how she spotted him across the room. Her whole face changed, lit up in a way that made my stomach twist. It wasn't excitement from seeing an old friend. It was something else. Something deeper. I had seen that look before. It was how she used to look at me. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But then, little things started piling up. I'd turn my head, and there they'd be, off to the side, deep in conversation, heads close together. Every time I tried to join in, I felt like an outsider intruding on something I wasn't meant to hear. Then there was the moment that really stuck with me. One of my friends, Nate, came up and stood beside me, drink in hand. He wasn't looking at me when he spoke. He was looking at them. "That's gotta suck, man." I frowned. "What?" He nodded toward Emily and Ryan, who were standing a little too close together, laughing at some inside joke. "Watching your girl flirt with another guy at your own engagement party." I laughed it off, but it didn't sit right. Because Nate wasn't the paranoid type. He wasn't the kind of guy to stir drama. And if he was noticing it, that meant other people were too. I tried to talk myself down. It was just harmless fun. She was just happy. Maybe I was the one being insecure. But then the dancing started. I was off to the side, caught up in a conversation with one of Emily's cousins when I heard the music change. It was some slow song I didn't recognize, the kind meant for couples. And right in the center of the room, under the dim glow of string lights, were Emily and Ryan. Dancing. Not the kind of polite, distant dance you have with a friend. No, this was close. Intimate. Like there was no one else in the room. I stood there, frozen. My fiancé, my future wife, swaying in another man's arms while our friends watched, some whispering, some pretending not to notice. I should have walked over. I should have said something. But I didn't. I just stood there. And for the first time, I felt it. The crack in the glass. I don't remember much of the rest of the engagement party after that dance. Everything blurred together, conversations I wasn't really listening to, drinks I barely tasted, and forced smiles I could feel cracking at the edges. What I do remember is standing there, watching Emily with Ryan, and feeling something shift inside me. A part of me that had been holding on, telling myself that everything was fine, that I was overreacting, finally broke. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Something was wrong. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to pull her aside and ask her what the hell she thought she was doing. But I didn't. Not yet. Because some part of me, maybe the part still clinging to hope, needed more. So I watched. And what I saw only made it worse. After the dance, Emily finally came back to me, all smiles like nothing had happened. She slipped her arm around mine, leaned in close, and whispered, "Having fun?" I didn't answer. I just nodded, forcing a tight smile. But then I saw Ryan out of the corner of my eye. He was looking at her. Not just looking, watching. The way a man watches something he thinks belongs to him. I clenched my jaw. I told myself I'd bring it up later, once we were alone. But as the night went on, I started noticing even more. The way she kept checking her phone. The way Ryan seemed to always be near, like a shadow. The way their conversations would pause when I got close, like I had just walked in on something I wasn't supposed to hear. Then came the final straw. At one point, I left the main party area to get some air. I was tense, my thoughts racing, and I just needed a second to breathe. But as I rounded the corner of the venue, I heard voices. Emily's voice. And Ryan's. I stopped, staying hidden behind the corner, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who eavesdrops on his own fiancé. But something in their tone made my stomach tighten. Then I heard her laugh. That soft, familiar laugh she used to give me. Then Ryan's voice, low but clear. Come on, Em, you know it's still there. Silence. Then Emily's voice, quiet. Hesitant. Ryan, don't. Why not? You think he doesn't notice? You think he doesn't see it? We both know this was never over. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. I walked away, my mind spinning. That was it. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just in my head. This wasn't just paranoia. Emily wasn't just slipping away from me. She was already gone. I barely remember how the night ended. I must have gone back inside, played my part, smiled when necessary, nodded at people's congratulations. But I wasn't there anymore. All I could hear was Ryan's voice repeating in my head. You think he doesn't notice? Well, I did now. By the time we got home, I was wound so tight I could barely speak. Emily, on the other hand, was in a great mood, laughing, humming to herself as she kicked off her heels. Tonight was amazing, she said, stretching her arms over her head. I can't believe how perfect it all was. I just stood there, watching her. Perfect. Perfect. It took everything in me not to explode right then and there. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to accuse her without giving her a chance to explain. But I was going to get answers. I cleared my throat. Can we talk? She glanced at me, her smile faltering just a little. Now. Babe, it's late. I crossed my arms. Yeah. Now. She sighed, rubbing her temple like I was already exhausting her. Okay, what's up? I stared at her, trying to find the right words, trying to steady my voice. I heard you and Ryan talking earlier. Her whole body stiffened, just for a second, but I caught it. She covered it up quickly, forcing a confused smile. Okay. And? I swallowed hard. You told him to stop. Emily blinked. What? When he said, you know it's still there. When he told you this wasn't over. I took a step closer, watching her carefully. You didn't tell him he was wrong. You didn't tell him there was nothing between you. You just told him to stop. Her face changed then. The fake confusion melted away, and something else took its place, something wary, something cornered. Alex, just tell me the truth, I cut in, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. Whatever it is, I need to hear it from you. She looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. But still, I waited. She swallowed, playing with the hem of her dress, her fingers twitching like she was stalling for time. Finally, she spoke. It's complicated. A bitter laugh escaped me. No, Emily. It's not. She ran a hand through her hair, exhaling shakily. It's not like I don't love you. I do. But Ryan and there's a history. And I thought I was over it, I really did. But seeing him again, being around him, she shut her eyes. I don't know, Alex. I don't know what I feel. I felt something inside me snap. You don't know. My voice rose, the control I'd been clinging to slipping through my fingers. We're getting married in a few weeks, Emily. You should damn well know by now. She flinched, her arms wrapping around herself. I didn't mean for this to happen. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. That's what people always say, isn't it? She looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw guilt. Real guilt. I never wanted to hurt you. I exhaled, my hands curling into fists at my sides. Well, I said quietly, you did. Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Suffocating. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What now? I looked at her, at the woman I thought I knew. The woman I had planned to spend my life with. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I even recognized her anymore. I stood there, staring at Emily, my mind racing. What now? That was the question, wasn't it? A few hours ago, we had been engaged, planning a future together. Now, I wasn't sure if we even had one. I don't know, I finally said, my voice tight. Emily shifted uncomfortably, wrapping her arms around herself. Alex, No, I cut her off, my tone sharper than I intended. I need you to be honest with me right now. No more vague answers. No more, I don't know. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay steady. Do you still have feelings for him? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, yes. It felt like a punch to the gut. Even though I had already suspected it, hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. I nodded slowly, swallowing hard. And when were you planning to tell me? Emily's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean for this to happen, Alex. I love you, I do. But when Ryan came back into my life, I started feeling things I didn't expect. I was confused. I let out a bitter laugh. You were confused? So you let him hang around, let him cross every boundary imaginable, and instead of shutting it down, you entertained it? I ran a hand through my hair, trying to keep my emotions in check. You weren't confused, Emily. You were choosing him. She shook her head desperately. No, it's not like that. I swear, I never. She stopped, clenching her jaw. I narrowed my eyes. You never what? Silence. Then, she broke eye contact. That was it. That was all I needed to see. I exhaled sharply, stepping back like I had just been burned. Jesus, Emily. Alex, please, she reached for my hand, but I pulled away. No, I said, my voice breaking. You don't get to stand here and beg me to understand. You made your choice. And you sure as hell didn't choose me. She started crying then, her shoulders shaking, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not this time. I turned away, walking toward the bedroom, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I needed space. I needed time to think. But as I reached for the door, I heard her whisper behind me. I don't want to lose you. I stopped, my fingers gripping the doorframe. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to turn around, pull her into my arms, pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't. Because I already had. She may have been standing in front of me, but in every way that mattered, she was already gone. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to let go too. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Emily's quiet sobs from the other room. A part of me wanted to get up, to go to her, to pull her close and pretend this wasn't happening. But I couldn't. Not after what she had said. I don't know what I feel. You think he doesn't notice? Yes. The words kept replaying in my head, like a song I couldn't turn off. My fiancé, the woman I thought I was going to spend my life with, had feelings for another man. Worse, she had let those feelings grow. She had let Ryan linger in our lives like an open wound. And I had let her. That was the part that made me sick. The signs had been there for months, but I ignored them, made excuses for her, convinced myself I was just being insecure. I had put blind faith in someone who had been slowly pulling away, and now I was paying the price. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I got up, showered, got dressed, and walked into the kitchen, where Emily sat curled up at the table, her eyes red and swollen. She had barely slept either. She looked up at me, hopeful, like maybe I had woken up with a change of heart. I hadn't. We need to call it off. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. Emily's face crumbled. Alex. No, I held up a hand. Don't. I can't do this. You don't get to cry and tell me you love me when you were out there entertaining another man this whole time. I exhaled sharply. You don't get to stand in front of me and hesitate when I ask if you love me. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Please, she begged. Can't we work through this? I laughed bitterly. You spent our engagement reconnecting with your ex. You danced with him at our party, and you snuck off to have private conversations about how you don't know what you feel. I shook my head. This isn't something we work through. This is something you did. And now we live with the consequences. Tears streamed down her face. But I love you. I stared at her, my chest tight. Then you should have chosen me. Silence. I walked to the counter, grabbed my keys, and turned back to her one last time. I'll send someone to get my stuff. I need space. And then, before she could say anything else, before I could change my mind, I walked out the door. I didn't look back. I don't remember much about where I went that morning. I just drove. Nowhere in particular, just away. Away from that apartment, away from the life I had spent years building, away from her. I ended up at Brian's place. He was my closest friend, the kind of guy who could read me like a book even when I didn't say a word. I must have looked like hell when I showed up at his door because the first thing he said was, "Shit, man. What happened?" I just shook my head and walked past him into his apartment. He didn't push me to talk, didn't ask questions right away. He just handed me a beer, sat on the couch beside me, and waited. It took me a while before I finally said it out loud. I called off the wedding. Brian let out a low whistle. Damn. He took a sip of his drink. Ryan? I nodded. He muttered something under his breath and shook his head. Knew that dude was a problem the second I saw him sniffing around. I clenched my jaw. Yeah, well. I should have known too. Brian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. So, what now? That was the question, wasn't it? I had spent the last 4 years of my life with Emily. She had been my future. Now, that future was gone, and I was left standing in the wreckage of something I thought would last forever. I don't know, I admitted, my voice hollow. I just feel empty. Brian sighed. Look, man. I know this is fresh, and I know it hurts like hell. But you did the right thing. You can't be with someone who doesn't put you first. I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed it yet. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Then Brian clapped a hand on my shoulder. All right. Enough of this sad shit. You're crashing here tonight. And tomorrow? He grinned. Tomorrow, we start figuring out what's next. I let out a tired laugh, shaking my head. You make it sound so easy. It's not. But that doesn't mean you stop moving. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. He was right. I couldn't let this break me. I had lost Emily. But maybe, just maybe, I could find myself again. Waking up the next morning in Brian's spare room felt surreal. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up next to Emily. There was no warm body curled up beside me, no sleepy murmurs or stolen kisses before we started our day. Just silence. Cold and unfamiliar. And yet, in some strange way, it was a relief. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, processing everything. The breakup, the betrayal, the emptiness that settled in my chest. I wasn't okay, not even close. But I was free. And that counted for something. Eventually, I got up and wandered into the kitchen, where Brian was already making coffee. Morning, Heartbreak Hotel, he said, handing me a mug. I rolled my eyes but took it. Thanks. He leaned against the counter, studying me. How you holding up? I exhaled. Like someone ripped my heart out and stomped on it. So, you know. The usual. Brian nodded. Sounds about right. We stood there in silence for a moment, drinking our coffee. Then he set his mug down and stretched. All right, listen up. You got two choices. You can spend the day moping around, overanalyzing every little thing that went wrong, checking your phone like an idiot, and basically making yourself miserable. He smirked. Or, you can go do something, anything, other than sitting here feeling sorry for yourself. I stared at him. You really have a way with words. I do my best. He clapped me on the back. Now, what's it gonna be? I knew what he was doing. He was giving me a push, forcing me to take a step forward even if I wasn't ready. And honestly, I needed it. So I set my mug down and sighed. Fine. Let's do something. Good choice. He grabbed his keys and grinned. First stop, gym. You need to work out some of that emotional damage. I groaned. You're kidding. Do I look like I'm kidding? Unfortunately, he didn't. And so, a few hours later, I found myself at the gym, throwing punches at a heavy bag while Brian egged me on. Come on, man. That bag is Ryan. Show it who's boss. I rolled my eyes but didn't stop. My knuckles ached, my muscles burned, but damn, it felt good to hit something. For the first time since everything happened, I wasn't just sitting in it. I was moving through it. And maybe, just maybe, I'd be okay. I didn't expect much to change after that workout. I figured I'd go back to Brian's, shower, maybe distract myself with some mindless TV. But when I checked my phone after leaving the gym, my stomach twisted. There were messages from Emily. Emily, Alex, can we talk? Emily, please, just once. I need to explain. Emily, I miss you. I locked my phone and clenched my jaw. Brian, noticing my reaction, didn't even ask. He just sighed. She texted, didn't she? I nodded. He grabbed my phone right out of my hand before I could stop him. What the hell, man? He held it up, scrolling. Let's see. Yep. Classic guilty ex playbook. I miss you, yikes, she really went for it, huh? He glanced at me. You thinking of answering? I hesitated. A part of me wanted to. A part of me still had that instinct to fix things, to hear her out, to understand. But another part of me, the one that remembered how she looked at Ryan, how she hesitated when I asked if she loved me, knew better. I shook my head. No. Brian grinned. Atta boy. He handed my phone back. Delete them. I stared at the screen for a second. Then, with a deep breath, I swiped left and hit delete. One message after another, until they were gone. Brian let out an exaggerated gasp. Ladies and gentlemen, we have progress. I rolled my eyes. Shut up. He nudged me. Seriously, though. Proud of you, man. And for the first time in days, I felt a small sense of control. I had spent so long being blindsided by Emily, drowning in confusion and heartbreak. But in that moment, choosing not to respond, choosing myself, it felt like I was finally taking a step in the right direction. Even if I had no idea where I was going. Ignoring Emily's texts was one thing. But ignoring the mess she left behind? That was a whole different battle. My stuff was still at our apartment. My name was still on the lease. And at some point, I was going to have to deal with both. I put it off for a few days, telling myself I wasn't ready. But the longer I waited, the more I realized something. Emily expected me to come crawling back. Maybe not to reconcile, but at least to talk. To give her one more chance to explain, to justify what she did. I wasn't going to give her that. So I called her. She picked up on the first ring. "Alex?" Hearing her voice sent a sharp pang through my chest, but I forced myself to stay steady. "I need to pick up my stuff. No small talk. No pleasantries. Just business." There was a pause. "When?" "Tomorrow." Another pause. "Okay." I could hear it in her voice, she wanted to say more. She wanted to ask how I was, if we could talk, if I had changed my mind. But I didn't let her. "Text me when you're not home. I'll come get my things then." She inhaled sharply, like my words physically stung. "You don't even want to see me?" I clenched my jaw. "No, Emily. I don't." Silence. Then, in a broken whisper, "Okay." I hung up. Brian, who had been listening from the couch, gave an approving nod. "Cold. Efficient. I like it." I let out a shaky breath, tossing my phone on the table. That sucked. "Yeah, well. Breakups aren't fun, dude." He leaned back, stretching. "But you did good. You kept control. And that was the key, wasn't it? For so long, I had been at the mercy of Emily's choices. What she wanted. What she felt. Now it was about me. Tomorrow, I'd pack up my life. And after that, I'd start building a new one. The next day, I drove to the apartment for what I hoped would be the last time. Emily had texted me that morning. "Emily, I won't be home between 2 and 5. You can come then." No extra words. No last-minute attempts to talk. Just straight to the point. It should have made things easier. But as I parked outside, my stomach twisted. This wasn't just some apartment. This was where we built a life together. Where we had lazy Sunday mornings, burned dinner while cooking together, and stayed up late talking about the future. A future that didn't exist anymore. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The place was quiet. Too quiet. Without Emily's presence, it felt hollow, like a shell of what it used to be. I didn't waste time. I grabbed some boxes and went straight to the bedroom, methodically packing my clothes, my books, the things that were undeniably mine. Then I got to the smaller things. The framed photos on the nightstand. The coffee mug Emily got me as a joke that I secretly loved. The drawer where she always borrowed my sweatshirts and never gave them back. Little reminders of what we were. I clenched my jaw and kept moving. Halfway through packing, I opened the closet and saw something that made me freeze. My suit. The one I had bought for our wedding. Still hanging neatly in the garment bag, untouched. I stared at it, my chest tightening. This was real. This was happening. There was no fixing it, no going back. I shut my eyes for a second, willing the ache away. Then I grabbed the suit, tossed it into the pile, and moved on. An hour later, I was nearly done. I was taping up the last box when I spotted something tucked between the couch cushions, my old watch. The one Emily used to steal off my wrist and wear around the house just to mess with me. I picked it up, turning it over in my palm. Then I set it on the counter. I didn't need it anymore. By the time I loaded everything into my car, I felt lighter. Not happy. Not healed. But like I had finally closed a chapter that had been dragging on too long. As I turned onto the main road, I didn't look back. I was done living in the past. It was time to start looking forward. Driving away from that apartment should have felt like a victory. Like I had finally taken control, finally put Emily behind me. But as I sat at a red light, gripping the steering wheel, I felt empty. I had spent so much time thinking about leaving that I hadn't really thought about what came next. Where was I supposed to go from here? I had a few weeks left on my lease at Brian's place, but I knew I couldn't crash there forever. I needed my own space. Somewhere that wasn't tied to Emily, somewhere that felt like mine. So I pulled into a coffee shop, opened up my laptop, and started looking at apartments. It felt weird, like I was browsing for a new life. Some places were too small. Some were way out of my budget. Some looked decent but had terrible reviews. I nearly gave up when I stumbled across one that felt right. A one-bedroom in a quieter part of the city. Nothing fancy, but cozy. A fresh start. Without thinking too hard, I set up a tour for the next morning. It wasn't just about finding a place to live. It was about moving on. When I closed my laptop, I felt a little lighter. Baby steps. I finished my coffee, stretched, and checked my phone. A new message from Brian. Brian, hope you didn't go back for one last goodbye. Otherwise, I'm legally obligated to slap you. I smirked and texted back. Me, no goodbyes. Just boxes. His reply came instantly. Brian, proud of you. Now let's get drunk. I laughed, shaking my head. Maybe I wasn't there yet. Maybe I still had nights ahead where the memories would creep in, where I'd wonder what could have been. But for now, I was taking the first step. And that had to count for something. Brian wasn't kidding about getting drunk. That night, he dragged me to a bar under the pretense of celebrating my freedom. In reality, I knew what he was doing, distracting me, making sure I wasn't sitting alone in my thoughts, replaying the last few days like a broken record. I appreciated it, even if I wasn't in the mood to party. The place was packed, music pulsing, people laughing and drinking like nothing in the world could touch them. I envied that. We grabbed a table, and Brian immediately ordered 2 shots. To new beginnings, he said, holding his glass up. I hesitated for a second before clinking mine against his. To getting my life back. We knocked them back, the burn spreading through my chest. It didn't make me forget, but it numbed things just enough. A few drinks later, I was starting to loosen up when Brian nudged me. All right, man. Enough brooding. You need to talk to someone. I sighed. Not happening. He smirked. Don't worry, I already took care of it. Before I could stop him, he waved someone over. I turned, and froze. She was stunning. Not in an over-the-top way, but in that effortless, confident way that made people take notice. Dark hair, bright eyes, and a smirk that told me she was used to handling guys like Brian. Alex, meet Gail, Brian said, grinning like he had just set up the deal of the century. Gail, this is my recently single, emotionally damaged best friend. I shot him a glare. Jesus, Brian. Gail laughed, sliding into the seat across from me. Well, that's one hell of an introduction. I rubbed the back of my neck, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Sorry about him. He has no filter. Oh, I figured that out already, she said, taking a sip of her drink. But hey, I'm all for helping a guy take his mind off his ex. I raised an eyebrow. And what makes you think I'm thinking about my ex? She smirked. Because you're gripping your drink like it's the only thing holding you together. I blinked, then looked down at my hand. Sure enough, my knuckles were white around the glass. Gail leaned in slightly, her voice softer. Look, I don't do rebounds. But if you need a conversation with someone who won't pity you, I'm your girl. Something about her energy, her directness, made it impossible not to relax. I exhaled and set my drink down. All right, Gail. No pity. Just conversation. She smiled. Good. So tell me, how did she screw you over? I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. And just like that, for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt something shift. Maybe I wasn't broken beyond repair. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready to start over. To be continued. I didn't expect to talk to Gail for as long as I did. What started as casual conversation turned into something deeper. She didn't just ask about Emily, she asked about me. What I wanted, where I saw myself going, what I had forgotten about myself while I was busy trying to make a broken relationship work. Somewhere between the third drink and the laughter that came easier than I thought it would, I realized something. I wasn't just moving on from Emily. I was moving on from the version of myself that let someone else dictate my worth. By the end of the night, Gail stood to leave. She wasn't playing games, wasn't trying to be the next thing to fill the void. But before she left, she grinned and said, "You're gonna be okay, Alex." And for the first time in a long time, I actually believed it. A week later, I moved into my new apartment. It wasn't much, just a simple one-bedroom with barely any furniture, but it was mine. Emily reached out one last time. "Emily, I just want to say I'm sorry. I hate how things ended. I hope you're okay." I stared at the message for a long time. Did I still hurt? Yeah. Did I still have moments where I wondered what could have been? Of course. But I also knew that some things weren't meant to be fixed. I didn't owe her anything, not anger, not forgiveness, not even a response. So I deleted the message and put my phone down. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I stepped out onto my new balcony, took a deep breath, and let the past go. The chapter was closed. And my story was just beginning.